When the sun sets, the undead awaken. To slake their hunger, they feed upon the herd of unaware mortals. Right beneath our noses, the kindred clash against their rivals as they vie for control of the city of San Francisco. Are you strong enough to cheat final death and see another night? Vampire the Masquerade Rivals Expandable card game from Renegade Game Studios.
Everyone, welcome to Vampire Wednesdays. I am Sara Erickson, Director of Sales and Marketing here at Renegade Game Studios, and I'm so lucky today to be joined by a very, very important team member from Team Renegade. We have our creative director in charge of all things beautiful at Renegade, Anita Osborne. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you're such an important part of Vampire, and we've heard from so many of our fans that it's incredibly important to them that they have beautiful art, which has always been a staple of Vampire, the Masquerade, World of Darkness, everything. When people think about this whole universe, they think about the beautiful and rich artwork. So I think it's going to be really interesting to chat with you today to really dive into the process that we went through to get to the point that we are, and then also some of the changes that we made based on the fan input, which was actually a really cool thing, because normally you kind of are doing everything behind the scenes and all of a sudden the curtain is open and the game's just out there. But this time we got to show people a little bit of the behind the scenes before it came out, and then actually make improvements and make it better based on their feedback. So we're going to chat about that whole process. And during this chat, any of you fans out there in the chat, if you have questions, please post them. We're going to be watching that, answering questions as we go, kind of jumping back and forth, and also just showing you a whole lot of the cool new stuff we have. So Anita, tell us just a little bit about yourself before we dive into Vampire Rivals specifically. So how did you get to be part of Team Renegade?
I started probably a year after Renegade launched. So I got to go in really early on with Scott, just as a freelance graphic designer. He had me work on Snowtails. I think it was like the first game I touched. And so that was really fun. I got to illustrate a little bit in that game. And we just basically did a revamp of it. So being with Renegade from that early on to now, it's been a progression, and it's gone through many little revamps itself just as a company. So I do graphic design. I work with graphic designers now. We have a whole graphic design team, production artists, and I also work with all the illustrators, all hand in hand with the dev team, the game designers and the producers. So we really try to collaborate and make sure that everyone's pitching in to make every game great.
That's awesome. And you have a long history of working with different companies even before Renegade, a really impressive resume as far as graphic design and all those types of artsy things are. Does that sound right? Obviously, that's not what I do at Renegade.
I'm so excited. I'm like, we get to talk about art and design today. Yay! Yeah, awesome. So I went through a very compacted program through Cal State Long Beach, through their BFA program in visual communication and graphic design, and also got a minor in marketing. So that took me through like an 8 years in college of just studying design. I mean, it's pretty intense. It should have only been, as everyone kind of dives around, and it just makes us more of a whole, better person and more educated in every realm. But yeah, I've worked for Landor as an intern. They're one of the biggest design agencies in the world. Myers Brands in San Diego, Design Asylum, Spin Master. I worked for them for a while. Upper Deck, of course. And then also like SDA Creative. So I worked for some ad agencies. So I've really, anything design, I've any kind of form of design, any kind of like marketing materials, I've kind of have some experience just because I've had the opportunity and to do that.
So then when we started thinking about Vampire the Masquerade Rivals Expandable card game, you, of course, are the creative director for Renegade, but then we couldn't rely on only you to make the artwork for this game, obviously. So tell us a little bit about all of, you don't have to go into detail about all the different people, but tell us how you went about working with this whole team of illustrators and graphic designers to get this thing to the state that it's in now.
So the way Renegade works is we have our core group of graphic designers, and I usually try to match up the game project to the best suited graphic designer. In this case, it was Cold Castle Studios. We work very closely with them. Chaba Bernath from there is a phenomenal designer. He's done several games for us, so I totally trust his judgment and his design skills. So just from the beginning, as far as walking you through the process, the development team and the game designers come to us and they say, okay, we think we have this game close to nailed down. It's never totally perfect because there is some back and forth that goes along as we create the visuals for any game. So that will come through to us through a spreadsheet or a Word doc. No visuals at all, usually. Sometimes they have like some clip art in there or something, or some kind of idea for a prototype. And I know Matt Hyra did an extensive amount of research and play testing before it got to us. So he did have his prototypes in this case. So that will come through us. We all look at it, look at the scope of the project, see who the target market is, see who's going to be playing it, see what the theme is, start doing our research, make sure that we know everything there has to do with this game. The genre, the history, especially with Vampire, there's such a deep history and there's so much to learn about it that a large portion of that early time is just doing the research to make sure that we know what we're getting into. So once the graphic designer gets all that information, we find out what the game development team wants as far as icons, what they need to say, what they're going to be called, because sometimes that influences what we actually make. And it all starts with sketches. Different graphic designers will approach it differently, but it can be a pencil sketch that we show the dev team first, or it might be computer renders. And we kind of just start from there. We usually try to show 2 to 3 options for every icon, for every logo we make, for every card layout. It just kind of starts from there. And we kind of say what's working, what's not working, and build on top of that as we go through with the graphic design first. Yeah.
I think another kind of interesting thing for me when I started working at Renegade and started to get to see the behind the scenes process is also working with style guides. So at the very beginning of your sort of graphic design process, we also get a lot of information from the World of Darkness team, and they tell us, so this is what would make sense as far as an icon for this clan. And here's the fonts that we usually use to make it look like it's in this world. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that at all?
Yeah, so every big brand usually has a style guide. Some are more finished than others. Some are in progress when we get them because we're trying to release products at the same time. So with World of Darkness, we got their style guide. We were given information like the icons for each clans, stuff that we had to use, right? Stuff that you cannot deviate from. And then there's stuff that we can create that kind of goes along with it. So making sure that whatever we create matches their style and matches their core branding. So everything looks like it belongs together. Their style guide gave us a lot of information as far as fonts, like they're trying to really streamline the look as far across their branded items. So we were limited to certain fonts, which we got to work. But at the beginning, I remember, Chaba was throwing out some other fonts and he's like, this would be so much cooler. We could use this font. But ultimately, we went back and forth with the World of Darkness team, and they said, okay, let's settle on this. And we met at a good compromise to make sure, because it has to work for gameplay as well. Like, even though a font may look beautiful and it might look good as a display font, for example, where it's large, it may not work small like on a card, because you need to be able to see it at a distance or in your hand or whatever, if it's a quick read or not a quick read. All that has to come into play. Serif fonts, sans serif fonts, they all read differently, so we take all that into account.
It's a lot to consider when you're talking about just a little tiny card that's only this big. There's a lot of stuff on there. So speaking of cards, I'm sure everybody here is very excited to see some of the stuff in its more final form, since we've been working on this since the Kickstarter ended, and we really haven't actually shown off any of the final versions of these. So I believe we have a Toreador card first. That sound about right? And Desiree is helping us out behind the scenes today. So she's going to be posting those images for us. And hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties like thunderstorms like we did last week.
I can hear him coming in.
Cool. So yeah, yikes. So here's our first look at the new version of this card. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so with any card, there is a process that goes through. Like, you have the hierarchies that come into play. I'm totally gonna geek out on you right
now. Do it. That's great. Very cool.
So we went through so many versions of this card, and this is the core vampire card. This is obviously the Toreador version of it. But making sure that the illustration sings and that it says, that it complements what the written text is. Making sure that that blood potency icon is prominent, as well as the clan icon. So, and there's so much going on. There's so much information being given on this card that it was really important to make sure that everything was well organized, that the hierarchy was established, that nothing looked crowded. That we're considering eye flow, we're considering the icons within the text, that make sure that they relate back to the full rendered icons. All that was considered. And thanks to the Kickstarters, all the feedback we got on the supporters on Kickstarter, we did make some changes from the version that was shown on the Kickstarter itself. So we first and foremost, we ended up adding the Illustrator credit to the card. We have so many amazing illustrators on this project that we absolutely agreed that we should add them in. Normally with some of our smaller projects, it will just be one illustrator for any given game. With this one, we have, I think it's like 7. We have a lot of illustrators, amazing illustrators. So we wanted to make sure that they each got their credit on there. And then also you've got the attack icons. We did some work with those, made sure that they actually matched up to the brand look and was consistent across the board that way as well. We actually ended up expanding the text box so it was more integrated in with the VTM icons as well. So the VTS. So there's little things that happened, but the nice thing is that it all came together and it looks solid now, and we all feel pretty happy about it.
I would say one of the most obvious things for me looking at this card is also the shift in color that you did on this particular one.
Yes, so that was one of the big feedback points we got from the Kickstarter, was this originally was red. Which is a Toreador, color. It's a strong color. It fits the clan very nicely, but it also means blood in the vampire world, right? And red definitely stands out on any given card. Like, it usually means stop, or it's an attention getter. So we wanted it. So we definitely listened and we rolled it back, working with the World of Darkness team. We decided on a Bordeaux wine color. Just so it would sit on the same plane as all the other vampire cards. Yeah,
I think that just turned out fantastically well. And I noticed you added a few other little minor details. I am no designer, and I will be totally straightforward. I was not watching this conversation about all these changes. So this is, I just saw this card for the first time earlier today. So you added a little bit more just detail to this as well, right? Some of the like little things around the icons and that type of stuff.
We did. So Chaba was very good. He actually added in the details before I even noticed it. There's so much detail on these cards that he has actually customized some of the borders around the icons to match the clan look and feel and their brand, like their sub brand basically. So each of the vampire clans will have different treatments around the icons, and he customized those each for each clan. So he put a lot of thought into this. He did an amazing job.
Yeah, and it might not show up quite as well on our live stream here, but we'll post pictures of these so you can see them a little bit better in a bigger view after the stream, and make sure you guys get those. So any fans looking at this, you'll get nerd out on all those little geeky details and know what they mean now. How exciting. So this was just one of a whole bunch of cards we wanted to show off. So let's move on to the next one and look at some other cool details. Maybe. It's coming, I'm sure. Yay, awesome. So we've got, it looks like 4 vampire leaders here. One from each of the clans.
Yeah, so part of picking that color for the Toreador was making sure that it's going to work with the other colors in this game, of course, and not to compete with all the main deck cards or the city pack cards. So when we picked this color, you think, oh, pink or a Bordeaux, a deep Bordeaux color is gonna be different. But we also have to go back and double check the whole palette for the whole game and make sure that it works hand in hand and that it's not competing with another card or where it's going to create confusion.
It's a lot of different colors to think about when you've got the icon colors and you've got the blood potency up there in the corner, and then also the art on the cards, and making sure that all those different things stand out really well and live on their own. I think that is a really big challenge, especially not only thinking about, like you said, this set, but we have a lot of content coming. We've got expansions planned that are still super secret, but a lot of future things to think about as well. So how much of that do you take into consideration?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we want to make sure when we're picking colors, when we go over the color palette for the entire game, for all the card sets, for all the card types, considering the clans, considering what they do, because it also has to make sense, right? We absolutely have to make sure that we leave an open door for those coming expansions. So ideally we try to do kind of at least have a loose idea of what we're going to do for those coming expansions when they come, but definitely try to optimize for what's in front of us.
So we did actually have a good question in chat. So I noticed this as well, actually, I was curious. So in Liju Chen, she has a drop shadow next to those icons on the bottom left, but it doesn't look like the other cards do. Is there a reason behind that?
So that's where a lot of that customization came into play. Those actually, if you were to look close, they're not really drop shadows, they're actually brackets on the icons. To make it fit the Toreador look and feel better in that stylization. So then if you go to the Ventru card, it's more of a gradient. It's treated a little bit more on a high society, more powerful giving look versus the Bruja card, where it's got more, if you were to look close, it's more of a rough line, more of a rough outline versus like the clean bracket look. So those are some of the subtleties that I was talking about before.
That's cool. Yeah, I can't wait to get a closer look of those so you can see all those little tiny details. That's going to be really neat. So another thing, like it's great to see the front of these cards. The vampire leaders are of course very, very important. But another thing that we're going to see as players all the time are actually the back of the cards. And there are several different backs in this game depending on what you're looking at. So we've got the agendas, the havens, the city deck, the library cards, and the vampire cards. So do you want to talk about this agenda card back and the changes you made there?
Yeah, so the Kickstarter backers actually brought up a really good point. We have been knee deep, up in this game for so long. We designed these card backs very early on. So we actually had the word agenda on there for the Kickstarter. And when we went back to look at it, someone had brought it up and they said, like, why is the word agenda and the word haven on the back of those two cards and not on like the city card or the main deck card or the vampire card even? So we said, yes, you are absolutely right. We need to take that off. So we did. And so we made some adjustments. We adjusted the size of the crown so that all the card backs now have a very consistent look to them. We kept the Rivals logo on the back of the vampire cards and on the main deck. On the main deck? No, I can't remember.
The library?
But we try to keep a consistent look across all of them. And that way it's more of a visual icon that's going to speak to you and you're not going to get confused about what it is.
Yeah, I think this turned out really beautiful. I love the stained glass look of it with the purple kind of shining through that outer line. It looks just great. I love that. Did you just lose power? Oh, no. Okay.
I did.
Yikes. Amazing. We always have weather problems on this show.
Goes again.
Oh dear. Okay. Awesome. Wow. Awesome. So if everyone doesn't know, yeah, there we go. It's just thematic. Anita actually lives in Costa Rica. She's deep in the jungle right now. So we'll have to give her a little bit of credit for some internet and potentially power issues. It's all good though. So yeah, that's great. Do we have any other card backs we can show? 'Cause like you mentioned, you did kind of fiddle with a few of them.
I believe we have the Haven card coming up. There we go. So it's just following the same look and feel, and it made sense to pull off those words on there and make it clean and easy to shuffle through. And it's
very nice.
Carries through to the dividers that we designed and through the card fronts. So very nice like that, Chaba.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm excited about those dividers because especially with the Haven cards and agendas, there aren't a lot of them, but they're so important for your game that having those as separate things separated out in your box, they're really easy to just grab and switch out, can really modify the way that your deck plays. So the dividers make that so organized that it's not a pain to have to sift through everything and find them. So I believe this moon back is the new Haven card, correct?
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. So we have the moon back is the Haven card. The crown is the agenda card. The city deck is the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge icon there. And then you've got the vampire cards and the library deck. And that's another thing to the design.
Yeah,
through the design process, I was just going to say, when terminology will change. Just as we go through the process with the development team, it used to be called the main deck, then it was called the library deck, and being able to adjust our designs and be able to adjust our terminology. So we're talking about the same things. So everything makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. So there was a question about why you left Rivals on the back of the library and the vampire cards, but not on the back of the city agenda and Haven cards. I'm sure that was an internal discussion.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how much we're allowed to talk about, but So we definitely wanted to make sure that the vampire cards are branded for the World of Darkness, Vampire, the Masquerade. So that is a specific card in this expandable card game, and we wanted to make sure that that was noted. Is that all I'm allowed to say?
That's cool. Yeah, so I'm not sure why that's scary, but it's fine. No, it's all good. I also think that they are just very different cards. Like you have a whole bunch of them that are all varied. So when you think about the library deck, they're not all just going to be the same. When you think about the Haven deck, every card, there's not really a deck. Every Haven is going to be a Haven, but in your library, you have a ton of different things. So it's a little bit harder to just give that one slap on the back and it's just all going to be the same. Like you want it to be a little bit more generic. And I think the Rivals logo does that. And that's the game we're playing. I'm excited about that. So
yeah, the
awesome.
agenda cards.
But yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, there's very few agenda cards that we wanted to make sure that that stood out because it's an important card in gameplay.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So yeah, what's our next type of card? Oh yeah, this is, we just talked about library cards. So let's show off the new version of the library cards a little bit.
So the library cards got a new border design and new color schemes across the board. Some colors were just revamped, but we definitely pulled back on the red card that we had, the red attack cards. We also did some shifting of the iconography placement on the upper left-hand side of those cards. And we try to integrate the blood potency into that same upper left corner, similar to the vampire cards, and also brought over the same housing from the vampire cards into those units that are below that, just so that there's a crossover, because it does tie into the vampire gameplay and those cards. So we wanted to make sure that there was a visual connection there and that it made sense. And it also caused everything to shift up, which kind of opened up the art window a little bit more so you could see more of the art as well. We also moved that little piece that's below the border up on top that holds the title bar and the blood potency logo icon. Also hold, like we wanted to make sure that nothing was just kind of floating on its own if we could avoid it, to make sure that everything has a place on the card, that it has a home, that it feels like it's supposed to be there. And so we really try to work in making everything feel like it belongs, and that your eye movement is going to move from the top title bar through those icons and then into that middle subtitle area, and then into the text box, of course.
Very cool. Yeah, that's great. So this is Humiliate, one of the cards that as a library card you could play in lots of different decks. And I'm sure that that is also a bit of a challenge, because it's not like you're trying to make this work for just one clan and be super clan specific. You need to just make it look like a card you could play in a lot of different decks, which is neat. That's cool. I like all those changes.
And
so we also have another.
Sorry, we did have a question on Facebook. So, and I don't think you can see those. So just real quick from Jesse, how many cards are in each expandable deck? I don't know if you guys know that. I don't know the exact number.
In the new expansion?
No, like in each one of the different clan decks, it's, I want to say it's 40, but I'm terrible at remembering things like this. I can go and look really quick. Do you remember, Anita?
So each clan deck has 49 cards, I believe. Is that right?
Oh, okay. So there's the pre-built decks are 40 cards each.
Right.
And then we have the Crypt Packs cards that could be added into there, and there are 63 Crypt Pack cards. Right. So yes, 40 cards for each one of those pre-built decks. As far as expansions go, we haven't announced what exactly that'll look like yet, so you'll have to stay tuned. So there we go. Hopefully that answers that question. Nice. So good deal. Can we see that next card, Desiree? I think this one is another card from the library deck. And you guys see some of those changes again on this as well.
Right. So a lot of the color was adjusted. The marble highlights, that was one of the concerns that the Kickstarter backers brought up, that they felt that the highlights in the marble around that framework was interfering too much with the titles and the text. So we wanted to make sure that we addressed that. Of course, everything looks different on screen than it does printed. We tend to gain black on press and colors aren't as vibrant. So when we design as graphic designers, we kind of take that into account. So, so what you're going to get once you get it in your hand, it's definitely going to look a little different than this. But we definitely pulled back on those to make sure that there wasn't any interference, to make sure that it's absolutely clear to read. So definitely efforts were made.
Very cool. Yeah, it is very striking now. Lots of good contrast. And of course, when you're playing a card game, you do want to be able to see all that information really quickly. So that high contrast is so important. That looks great. Yeah, Drew Tucker did this one. We have one more thing to show, and then we're actually going to dive into Drew Tucker's process a little bit. I'm excited to show off some of how he works. That'll be fun. So what's our last library card image? I think we have a bunch of different ones kind of to show the display of all of them.
Yeah, we did
several at once, maybe not all of them.
Yeah, we just kind of picked 6 just to kind of show the palette, how it works. We showed the vampire cards before this, the clan cards, and then now we have some of the library cards just to kind of show how this color palette works all together, and all the considerations that we took, as far as making sure that they sit well within the game and that they're still within the brand look, and complementing the illustrations and complementing the icons so that everything pops the way it's supposed to pop or not pop. So a lot of that thinking.
So many little things. So many things to think about. Yeah, those look great. That's very cool. So then just a random question for myself. I assume that the attack cards are going to be blue then? Is that consistent, or is that just for this particular one we're looking at?
It's just for the physical attack. So the physical attack card is blue. It's got the blue icon, the blue hand icon on it. The other attack cards are different colors, according to what they do and what we want them to. So everything matches up, right? So you have like the mental attack cards that are more of like that yellowish, more of like that yellow burnt color, that ties in with the icon color, which is more of a subdued yellow. They were brighter on the Kickstarter, but we pulled back on them because they were looking a little too bright. And we wanted it to fit the brand a little better. So we actually went through those icons, the mental, the physical attack, and also the lit iconography, to make sure that they all fit well. And those all actually match up to the frame, the card frame.
That's awesome. We did have a question. I can't tell from looking at these ones. So he was wondering, the blue, yellow, and red, are those for the just different types of attacks, and then the mixed colors like green, are those for the mixed types of attacks, or is that just kind of what it's looking like from here? Because that one's actually a reaction now that I look at it.
Yeah, so the yellow card that you're seeing on the screen right now, that's actually a mental attack. The blue one is a physical attack. The red one is a social attack. The black one, yeah, we're showing the black one. The black one is actually a ranged attack. And the green one you're seeing is a reaction card. The pink and bluish card that you're kind of seeing, that's a little bit purple, that's a modifier card. So that is also part of the library deck. And there's also a gray card that's like a non-combat card as well. That's part of the library deck.
So the color is, the color is not related to factions or anything like that, or
no.
It's like the green one is not trying to represent a mix of blue and yellow. It's just just different?
No, yeah, those are all separate cards. They all do different things, and they're all tied to the type of attack, what the card's function is, basically. They're directly tied to the card's function.
Nice. Well, that'll make it really easy, especially when you're playing after you've played quite a bit. The minute you see that bright blue card show up, you know it's going to be a physical attack. So I think that really helps in card play too, makes it super straightforward and definitely easier for sorting, as Matt pointed out there. Nice. Very cool. Well, I'm excited about the way all of those look, all the changes that you made. I know that was a long process, but also super important. Another thing that I think maybe we didn't really explain much is that because of the timing of the Kickstarter, you were still in the kind of the middle of that art process you normally go through. And we kind of pushed you a little bit harder than we should have to get a lot of this stuff ready for the Kickstarter and to show it on Tabletopia. And so normally your team would have done a deeper dive review of all of these cards and had a little bit more time to do that before we actually went live. So thank goodness for all our Kickstarter backers for noticing all these things, but also a credit to your team that you probably would have caught a lot of this in your last review process. So it's kind of cool though to get fans interested and be part of that. So I'm really glad that we got to do that.
Yeah, and also stuff. The dev team. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, and also the dev team.
No, go for it.
Our process as far as the graphic design portion goes, alongside with the illustration, but more of like the user interface on the card. We'll design it to a point where we all think we're pretty happy with it. And ideally in the schedule, we'll actually have a point where we hand it back to the development team and they will actually play test it with multiple times to make sure that we're not missing something. Because, when you're looking at something day after day, you tend to get really comfortable with it. So it's nice to just kind of take a step back, let the dev team do their play testing with it with new eyes, fresh eyes, play testers, some that have played with them, some that haven't in some cases. And then we get it back. And even now, like we took a couple weeks off, well, not a couple weeks, but maybe like a week from not looking at the cards on purpose, like I did personally anyway. And then I looked at them again just a couple days ago and I noticed things that I hadn't noticed. So before going off to print, like I always make sure, we go through with fresh eyes to make sure we're covering everything. And it brought up a couple questions. And so we're still like tweaking just little tiny things that maybe most people won't notice. And we can probably tweak forever because at some point we have to call it done. But we want to make sure that we're not missing anything important and that everything's covered and we're looking at it from different angles.
Definitely, for sure. That's an important part of that process. So speaking of process, I did want to show off one cool thing that you had prepared for us, which is Drew Tucker is one of the fantastic illustrators that worked super hard on this project. And he allowed us to share some of his early designs, in between designs, all the way to the final. And I think he has just such an interesting, striking style that it'll be really cool to look at what his process was. So let's go ahead and put some of those up and just see a little bit of behind the scenes from the illustrator's perspective. So when you contact an illustrator, what do you give them so that you can get what you're looking for at the end that makes sense for gameplay and will give the player the right kind of idea when they see that card?
So we have such a great batch of illustrators on this game. Definitely Drew Tucker, Amy Wilkins did the cover and she did an amazing job. She did most of the clan leaders and other cards in the set, as well as everyone will see or has seen. We have Felipe Gayona, Darko Stojanovic, and I'm going to mess up everyone's name, Krazen Maximo, Marco Primo, the Creation Studio did an amazing job, Cold Castle Studios did an amazing job, who also works with Chaba, it's Chaba's team. Drew Tucker has such an interesting style, and we purposely chose illustrators that we thought had slightly different styles, just to make sure that the game held some interest and that there was a variety within the packs. So, so Drew Tucker definitely has such an amazing style that is so different from Amy Wilkins, which is absolutely amazing. And I mean, I just sit there in awe when I see her work. And then I sit there in awe when I see Drew's work. And they're two totally different styles, and they have totally different approaches. Amy will do a sketch. We'll say, Amy, here's the idea. Throw us some sketches, and she'll send us a sketch and it looks almost like a finished piece. She's so amazing. Like, she just covers it all. Drew, some of these are going across the screen right now. He's a traditional, he'll do both digital and traditional. I think he did all of these traditional. So it's really fun to see his sketches go through on paper, and you can actually see the watermarks and the bubbles as he's pushing paint around on these canvases and paper. So he's got a really cool style that I think everyone loves. There's just a lot of emotion, especially in this one, humility.
I think we need to pause. We need to pause for a second. I think we got kicked out of the stream. Desiree, can you confirm?
No, it's there still. It's on my screen.
Okay, it's just my internet. So sorry, my internet's bad as always. Okay. It's terrible. So humility, such a cool looking card. So what information do you give him? Like, do you give him a really intense paragraph about what you want? Do you just give him a few words? Like, how much information do you get to give him?
So Matt Hyra is the game designer. So he's got his concept for each card. So he will actually write an art description for each specific card and say, okay, this is what I think it should be. This is what I want it to say. He'll hand that to me, and then I'll go through it and then reinterpret it sometimes for the illustrator, so that they understand. And there's a fine line too, making sure that we're communicating what Matt wants to say, but also making sure that the illustrators have enough of artistic free will to be able to create from their own minds, right? So that's the balance. And so for this particular one, I can't remember exactly what the art description said, but he totally nailed it. I think it actually called for someone whispering straight into that person's ear, but he moved them a little bit further away, which gives it so much more depth. And you can just feel the tension and the anxiety that this person is feeling as they're looking on, what this person is saying. This person is whispering out into the scene. It's intense. I love it.
There's so much emotion in this. It's really cool. Another thing that the artists have to deal with is a particular size that you request and shape so that it fits into those cards correctly, which also does limit their creativity a little bit.
Yeah, the graphic designer will typically do wireframes for the card designs. In a perfect process, we have the graphic designer start with the user interface. They do some wireframes so that the illustrator knows what's going to be covered up. So if there's going to be icons hanging in that art window, or if it's going to be an odd shape, if it's going to be a circle, if it's going to be a square, if there's going to be things, floating around, we make sure that the illustrator is aware of all that. And we also try to make everything bigger so we can use it appropriately for marketing and other promotional items.
Yeah, we on the marketing team are always asking for completely unrealistic things from the art department way after they've already made all the art. Sorry about that. But even things like just like play mats, we have to think really far ahead, because if we want a play mat that has a whole bunch of different illustrations, those are going to be made at a particular size. For the cards, we might need them at a different size for a playmat so that we don't blow them up and then they look all fuzzy and gross. So it's a really important thing for us to think about very far ahead, and something we are always trying to do better at on the marketing team. So yeah, it's an interesting process. Somebody actually mentioned sketch art cards as promos in the channel, which I think is interesting. At Cryptozoic, when I worked there, we actually did do sketch promos for the World of Warcraft trading card game. So I've had some thoughts about that. Might be interesting. That's good to know that you guys like those. If there's any other art type stuff that you guys would love to see as promos, I'd love to hear about that, because I think in my short time in this industry in the last 10 years, we've made almost every type of promo card I can imagine, but it's always fun to hear about different kinds. I can't imagine we'd want to do like rainbow foil cards for Vampire, but you never know.
Probably not. You never
Probably
know.
not. Awesome. So what's this also slightly creepy image that we have up here? You want to tell us about that one?
Yeah, so this is actually the finished piece from Darko. And I believe Desiree also has the sketch before it. So this kind of just shows the different ways that different illustrators work. So Drew will submit, I mean, they all kind of, they obviously all have to start with a line sketch of some sort, but and some actually block in color, or some illustrators will, go straight to the computer. Some start traditionally, and then we'll go to digital. So everyone's got their process. We normally will the only things we expect to see is a sketch, and usually 9 out of 10 times that's good to go. And then we'll say, okay, World of Darkness team is on board, game designer is on board, creative team is on board, go ahead and go to color. So it'll be a sketch and then the full color straight from that. Sometimes they'll show us different phases going through, especially if it's like a cover box art piece where it's going to be the face of the game. There'll be a few more iterations just to make sure that everyone's on board with each piece of it, and make sure that the detail gets in there, and that we're saying exactly what we want to say. It just gets a little more complicated with the cover art stuff, but the card illustrations, usually it's sketched to full color.
Nice. I will say we had an exciting development today. I'm not going to tell you any more information about it, but we did get approval for our first expansion box art today. And it's honestly one of my favorite pieces of art from all of Renegade. Like all the games we've ever done. Aww. I love the expansion box art. It's so awesome. I can't wait to show people. So yeah, that's going to be very, very cool. Well, fantastic. So I have a few little just sort of logistical things to tell people about what we've been doing here at Team Renegade this week. But if anybody has more questions for Anita, please post those in chat. Anita, if you think of anything else really exciting you want to tell people about art, please interrupt me. We can talk about that first. But yeah, just a few little things we've got going on. So today I spent a good chunk of time reviewing all of the awesome things we have in the Pledge Manager that'll be add-ons people can choose from, and making sure all the Pledge Manager stuff is ready. We are hoping to launch that very, very soon, by the end of this week or early next week. And basically all that means is that you've already said, this is the pledge level that I want, but we didn't give you the option in the Kickstarter to be able to add other individual items. So when you get that Pledge Manager link, you'll be able to say if there's anything else you want to add. Maybe you have a group of friends together and you want to get better shipping. If you order in sets of 3 of the all-in pledge, you can get a little bit better shipping rate. So that type of stuff. If you wanted to add maybe an extra core set, you can definitely do that. It will come with the 4 alternate art vampires and the smoke promo card, every set of that individual game that you order. So that's always a good bonus. And yeah, so then you'll decide all the things you want, pay for shipping, pay for any extra add-ons, and then put in your address so we know where to send it, and we'll get all those going really quickly. So that's going on as far as the Pledge Manager goes. If anybody has questions about that, please send them to our customer service team. That's really the best way to get all those questions answered. Any weird banking stuff we can help you out with. So yeah, that should be pretty good. That's happening really fast. And then after we have all that information from all you guys, we're going to be packing those out at our factory, getting all those bundles pre-made so that when you get it, it's hopefully, depending on what you order, it'll probably just be all in one big shiny box with vampire logos on the outside that Anita still has to create for me. And all pretty. And then, yeah, hopefully they'll be still on your doorstep in December. That's our goal. Should be very exciting. So yeah, anybody have any other good questions? It looks like somebody did have a question for you, Anita. What are some of your favorite games based purely on the art and graphic design? Any that serve as sort of inspiration? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's so many good games out there and so many amazing illustrators. Gosh, I mean, anything by Kwanchai, I just absolutely fall in love with. Kwanchai and Moria.
Kwanchai Moria? Oh, yeah. His stuff is amazing.
So good. Beth Sobel has some amazing pieces out there. Obviously, the Micho. I think I play games just because he illustrates those. All the Mitsu stuff.
Oh my gosh.
We have, look at it behind you. You have one back there.
Oh yeah, Raiders of the North Sea. The Miko did that one. Amazing.
Yeah. And that's part of the great part, or one of the great things about working with our team is that we get to work with all these amazing illustrators. And we find new blood as well. Another Kwanchai, nice. So it's always great to find illustrators who meet the brand first and foremost. And then, you know, if they're already in the game industry, that's great. But if they're not, like, we absolutely will go outside the game industry because their style meets our game project theme so well. And they know the property, or they know all the intricacies that go into the history of the lore or whatever it may be, because that's important too, right? Like knowing the depth of what you're absolutely drawing. It's not just a vampire, you know, there's obviously a lot to it. There's all the different types, and making sure that everyone understands where they're coming from. So that's always fun.
It's interesting how different that process can be between something like Power Rangers, where there's 25 years of different suits that they wear, different monsters that have really specific things. So working with somebody like Dan Mora, who's been illustrating Power Rangers materials for so long now, he doesn't have to have as much explanation, and you don't have to show him as many examples, versus somebody who's just new to it but can bring that really good fresh look. So it's always a balance, I think, of trying to find whether you're looking for something brand new and different, or something that really, really fits that brand. And that's cool, and definitely a challenge for your team.
Absolutely, especially with Power Rangers, because you said, like, there's, you know, over 25 years of stuff there. And, you know, we actually have some new illustrators coming in that are very heavy into comic book lore. So it'll be interesting to see how they put a spin on Power Rangers as well.
So we actually had another question. Let's see if I can digest this a little bit. Do you guys have plans for alternate art, to do clans with special effects for each clan, like making Tornado or Shiny, Venture Gold Edge, Malkavian text and art backwards, and so on? I think those are super fun ideas. I don't know that we actually have plans to do any of those particular things, but we do have some plans to make some cool promos. So we'll think about those. I really like the idea of having Venture with gold ink on it as a promo. I think that would be super sweet. What do we do for Bruja, though? Somebody has to give us good Bruja. I don't think we can put real blood on it, so that's probably out. But
Some kind of a texture would be cool, something that you can feel, like a texture.
Yeah.
Or something. That would be nice.
Well, except that it's a card game that might have its own problems.
Nice little, embossment. Probably wouldn't work either.
Oh no. So somebody else did have a good question. St. Bailey's is wondering about commissioning some of the classic Vampire the Masquerade art from the original RPG. I don't know if we have access to some of that. I don't believe we do, right?
We haven't up to this point. And then we haven't even had that as a discussion point, I don't believe. We have the World of Darkness style guides and their iconography, but none of their none of their artwork, like illustrations, paintings.
That's fair.
That's a good question.
Yeah, but we could definitely go look for some of those previous artists, or even maybe talk to people who could replicate some of that style a little bit more. That's definitely an option. And I think in some respects, we've already done that.
Yeah, we absolutely did. The World of Darkness team actually gave us a list of illustrators who had worked on VTES or on their core books. So we actually, that's where we found Amy Wilkins, and that's where we found Crazen, Maximov, and Felipe Gallona, I believe, also did work for them as well. So we have definitely carried over some of those illustrators from the World of Darkness team.
Very cool. Awesome. Bradstreet would be iconic. I am actually not familiar with Bradstreet. I assume that's an illustrator. Maybe you know? Nope. Okay.
I don't know.
Well, that's
familiar. I'm probably blanking out right now.
That's okay. No worries. Well, always, we clearly appreciate suggestions and we do take them very seriously. So we'll have to look that one up. That sounds pretty interesting. Nice. Well, very cool. We are just about out of time. So if anybody has any really quick final questions, let me know. Otherwise, Anita, it has been so awesome having you here explaining all of the art changes to us. Anyone who's in the chat, we are going to be putting out those cards. We're working really hard to get those into a state where we can show them all off to you and let you dig into those a little bit more. We're working on our website. They'll have a full card database on it where you can even build decks and look at all those cards up close in much larger views than what we showed you tonight. And hopefully very soon you'll actually have it on your own table. So it'll be nice and easy to see them then. It'll be great. Yay! Well, thank you for all the hard work you put into this. I am particularly excited to have those illustrator names on those cards. I think that's awesome. And yeah, it'll be good very shortly. So thank you, Anita. Thank you, everyone in chat. Great questions tonight. We look forward to seeing you next week here on Vampire Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific time. Thanks so much, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.